Chapter 16, Accusations and Denials. It was a blisteringly hot late afternoon in mid-July, but without the usual heat, haze, and smog. In spite of the lingering, oppressive humidity in the wake of a brief rainsquall that had blown across Paris that morning, there was almost unlimited visibility under a pale blue sky. Across Pont Alexandre III hurried an endless throng of pedestrians, mostly eager tourists. They chattered noisily in a variety of languages, exclaimed over the magnificent, colonnaded design of this popular link between the two banks of the Seine, and paused now and then to aim their cameras in various directions from this strategic viewpoint. The two figures standing off to one side near the center of the bridge and arguing guardedly didn't seem to belong in the same scene. "This is insane, meeting out in the open." Roger's voice crackled with suppressed anger. Ari stared at him coldly. "I trusted you all these years. And I've trusted you, so what's the sudden problem?" Looking grim, Ari leaned against the low metal railing of the bridge and eyed his companion closely. Hiding behind dark glasses, Roger stood ill at ease and stared with unseeing eyes at the slowly flowing waters below. Beads of sweat glistened on his forehead and ran intermittently down his face and neck, soaking his collar. "It took me a long time and a lot of effort to learn the truth," continued Ari evenly, watching Roger intently through half-closed eyes that squinted against the bright sun. At the implication, a nervous tick tugged spasmodically at a corner of Roger's mouth. He dabbed at his face and brow with an already damp handkerchief. "We've met in cabs for years," he responded at last, deliberately ignoring the implied accusation. "Why the sudden aversion?" "I've developed a terrible phobia about taxis. You never know who the driver might be, or where he might decide to go." Ari chose his words carefully. "A person could disappear." "I resent the insinuation. After the years we've worked together, I can't believe it." "It's not that I don't trust you. It's who you work for, and I know you have to follow orders." Roger's eyes blazed momentarily with anger. Then he stifled a hot denial to say with forced calm, "Look, let's get off this bridge and into the shade. I'm dying out here, and the river's foul today, after that rain." Ari made no move. "What's going to happen when the committee finds out who you really work for? Shall I tell them?" "I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't like these persistent innuendos." "Then let me make it clear. Your real boss has his office at Langley." "Langley?" cut in Roger. "You're accusing me of working for the CIA?" His face reddened with anger. "You've been reading too many spy novels," he blustered. "You're paranoid." Ari's eyes narrowed again, and a thin smile played across his lips. "Sure, and we're just a couple of tourists out here to take pictures. What would you like, the twin spires of Notre Dame behind you? Or how about over there, to your left, the dome of Hôtel des Invalides, where Napoleon's body lies? Paris le Magnifique." "Knock it off," snapped Roger. "I wouldn't think you'd be joking after what happened in China." "Joking?" Ari's expression hardened. "You think I'm joking? I lost some of my best friends, like Wang Whelan. Faced down a column of tanks and stopped them dead. Talk about raw courage from a 19-year-old. And those gangsters executed him." Ari thrust his face within an inch of Roger's. "I warned you." Roger drew back. "And I told the committee exactly what you said." "And those pig-headed idiots stuck to their own plans?" Roger shrugged. "It was a matter of opinion, and we were wrong." "A massacre," retorted Ari. "The whole program in China has been set back at least 5 years, maybe 10. "It could have gone the other way," argued Roger lamely, avoiding Ari's piercing eyes. "The students held Tiananmen peacefully for 6 weeks. No one could have known. I knew, and I told you exactly what was going to happen. If the committee tries to run my end of the deal one more time—" "They were trying to help," cut in Roger quickly. "They had a good man. The students followed him. To their graves, nearly all of the leaders I had trained." Ari turned away and stared in silence, following with his eyes a crowded tourist boat as it approached, then disappeared below the bridge, loudspeaker blaring descriptions and histories of everything in sight. Eastern Europe's just about ripe, he said at last, and turned to face Roger again. You tell Langley to keep its nose out. Roger shifted uneasily. Langley has nothing to do with it, so drop it. Where do you get these crazy ideas? You know that I know what I'm talking about. Now you go back and tell your bosses in Paris and Washington that at the first hint of interference, I'll shut the whole thing down. And I mean it. Roger made no response. He mopped his face and neck once more and stared down at the Seine flowing slowly by. Gorbachev and the Pope. They're the key, continued Ari after another long, uncomfortable silence. Right? Roger's only response was to shrug his shoulders and to continue dabbing futilely at his neck and brow with the wet cloth. I'll spell it out, persisted Ari. The Hungarians cut the barbed wire on the Austrian border back in May. East Germans are pouring into the west from Hungary, with Gorby's blessing. He's made a deal with Bush and the Pope. He had to. John Paul II has Poland in the palm of his hand. We both know Gorby's going to open the Berlin Wall and then finish off Soviet communism. Right? You're dreaming, came the nervous reply. Where do you get these fantasies? Fantasies? Laughed Ari. Stop bluffing. You're the one who's bluffing. Am I? I know everything, including what Bush doesn't know, the whole rotten corruption. The trail starts in Pakistan and leads through a network of banks, carefully avoiding implicating the Vatican Bank in more than 70 countries. And it's soon going to bubble up like a sewer overflowing the streets of Washington and pouring into the basements of Congress, the CIA, the White House. What are you talking about? You know very well what I'm talking about. Multinational fraud on a scale never even dreamed of before. Bribery, corruption, gun running, drug smuggling, terrorism, financed by a string of money-laundering banks involving multiplied billions. I've got the details of drug deals, Noriega's part, the CIA's role, where you fit in. You're mad. You listen to me carefully, said Ari evenly, his finger on Roger's chest. If some, let's say, unfortunate accident should happen to me or to any of my people, it would unleash a flood of embarrassing information with repercussions from Washington to Moscow. Roger was livid. You've got spies inside... He clamped his mouth shut and fought to control his rage. Now that we understand each other, continued Ari, let's move on. I was in that exclusive gathering of academics that met with Gorby at the Sorbonne last week. I liked what he said. He's obviously working with Washington and the Vatican. But don't let that deceive you. It isn't going to happen without millions taking to the streets, and that won't happen without my okay. Is that clear? I don't have time, snapped Roger, to listen to your wild speculations. Sure, Gorbachev and Bush and the Pope are friends, and that's good. Stop the Cold War. But they're each doing what's best for the people they represent. I thought the Pope represented God. How does that figure in? What are you getting at? The New World Order they talk about. Who decides the details? I thought we were all working for it. So did I. But lately I've started wondering whether we have different ideas about what that means. Don't give it a second thought, returned Roger soothingly. Oh, I'll keep giving it lots of thought. Careful thought. You can count on that. There was another long, strained silence. At last Ari added, I'm ready to move on all fronts in Eastern Europe. The students are getting restless. Are your people going to back us at the highest levels or leave us stranded? Roger glanced furtively around, pulled a fat envelope from an inside pocket, and slipped it quickly to Ari. There's double the usual in there. You'll get all the help you need. I'll be in touch. He turned abruptly and walked on across the bridge toward Grand Palais. Ari stood some moments longer, watching Roger until he had disappeared from sight. Then he turned his eyes beyond the broad esplanade to the expansive stone facade of Hôtel des Invalides. He recalled with a fleeting smile that in that vast military museum reposed the relics of Napoleon's disastrous retreat from Moscow in 1812. That historic debacle had led to the collapse of Imperial France. Just the previous week, Gorbachev, when he'd met with President Mitterrand, had enthusiastically hailed the partnership between the USSR and France. History was being turned on its head. The smile broadened. Marxism had transformed Russia into the terror of the world. And now, at last, the tide had reversed itself. Solidarity, outlawed for 7 years but rescued and backed by the Pope, had just won nearly every seat in Poland's Senate and lower chamber. And what was Solidarity? An organization of workers, the very proletariat that Marx and Engels, in the Communist Manifesto, had exhorted to unite. Indeed, they had united to overthrow Marxism itself. What irony! We've come full circle. The communist oppressors will be swept from power all across Eastern Europe, and even in the Soviet Union itself, where the nightmare began. Eventually, China will have to follow.